Columbia Law School charges over $88,000 a year in tuition. That is the highest of any law school in the country. And the median starting salary for a law school graduate is $95,000. So 1 year of tuition at Columbia costs almost as much as most new lawyers make in an entire year before rent, taxes, and loan payments. Now, I've coached law school applicants for over 20 years, and the question I get more than any other is, should I pay full price at a top law school or take the full scholarship at a lower ranked one? Now, today I want to show you how I think through this. And I've got two students I want you to meet, same LSAT range, opposite choices, completely different lives. And I'm going to share their stories in just a minute. Now, when people say T14, they mean the 14 highest ranked law schools in the country, like Stanford, Yale, Harvard, Columbia, Chicago, NYU, and so on. Those are the schools almost everybody's fighting to get into. And paying full price at one of them is expensive. Columbia, I said, over $88,000 a year, Harvard, $77,000 a year, Berkeley, $76,000 out of state. And that's only counting tuition. When you factor in rent, food, books, health insurance, it's a whole lot more. So when you add everything up, the total cost of going to law school right now on average is about $82,000 a year. At a private T14 in New York or DC, it's way more. Now, law school transparency puts GW's total cost, including interest, at $328,000 for 3 years. Columbia's in the same range. Then look at the interest. The main loan most students use is called a Grad Plus loan. It's a federal loan, and the interest rate on it is 8.9%. And that interest starts building the day the money hits your account on day one. If you borrow $130,000 during law school, you're going to owe over $150,000 before your first payments even due. And if you're starting law school after July 1st of this year, the math just got worse because the federal government eliminated Grad Plus loans for new students. So the max you can borrow in federal loans for law school is now $50,000 a year, $200,000 in total. So given that Columbia's tuition alone is $88,000 and the federal cap is $50,000, there's a $38,000 gap every single year. So you fill that in with private loans, savings, or money you just don't have. Now, private loans are a different animal because they've got higher interest rates. There's no option to lower your payments based on your income. There's no loan forgiveness programs. It's worse in every way. So if you're paying full price at a T14 going forward, you're piling private debt with worse terms on top of your federal loans. Now compare that to a full scholarship at a school ranked 40 or 50. Tuition would be zero because you got a full ride, and you've still got living expenses, but your total debt might be $60,000 to $80,000 a year, and that's all federal, all eligible for payment plans based on your income. So the gap between the two paths is $200,000 or more. Now, everybody who picks the expensive school has the same thought. They're thinking to themselves, big law firms pay $225,000 to start, so you'll be able to pay it off pretty easily. Now, when people say big law, they mean the biggest law firms in the country that pay $225,000 a year right out of school. Sounds like a lot, and it is a lot, but the math behind that plan falls apart the second you look at the data. Now, there is an organization called the NALP that tracks starting salaries for every law school graduating class. And what they found is that law graduate salaries don't spread out evenly. They split into two separate groups with almost nothing in between. One group earns between $55,000 a year and $100,000 a year, and a little over half of all new lawyers land there. The other group earns $225,000 a year, and that's big law. The halfway point, there's almost nobody in between. There's no $150,000 middle, it barely exists. Now, for the class of 2024, the median was $95,000, and that only counts people who got full-time long-term jobs. About 1 in 10 graduates didn't even get that. So the question isn't, what does big law pay? The question is, what are my odds of getting a big law job in the first place? Because if you don't get one, you're probably in that other group making $75,000 only with $1,800 a month in loan payments. And those odds depend almost entirely on where you go to school. T14 schools place about 55% of their graduates into big law, but they vary. Penn's around 64%, UVA's 71%, Cornell 72%. But if you leave the T14, those numbers drop pretty fast. The schools ranking 30 to 50, somewhere between only 10% and 40% get into big law, And at those schools, you've got to finish in the top 15 or 20% of your class to have a real shot. At the T14, you could finish in the middle and still get an offer. But we've got to look at the T14 a bit more deeply because people hear that a given school has 55% big law placement rate and they assume they're going to be in that 55%. But that is an average across the entire class. Your grades do still matter even at a top law school. If your LSAT and GPA put you in the bottom quarter of a T14 class, you're not getting T14 results. If you're at the bottom of your class at, say, Georgetown, for example, you're going to have worse job numbers than someone in the top 10% of a lower ranked school. So consider that a student stretches into a T14 where their numbers sit below the class averages. They're competing against classmates who walked in with higher scores and stronger prep. And the grading curve doesn't really care how hard you worked in undergrad. If your grades come back and you're in the bottom third, that big law hiring pipeline doesn't want you anymore. So you've gotten worse results paying higher prices, and you've gotten worse outcomes. Now, I'm going to tell you about a student who learned this the hard way in just a bit. But first, I wanted to share that if your numbers make you a borderline T14 admit, the full scholarship where you're at a school where you'd sit at the top of the class might be the better choice. Now, even if you're not at the bottom of your T14 class, big law jobs are getting harder for pretty much everybody to get these days because the way big firms hire is through summer internships called summer associate programs, meaning basically you work at the firm for a summer, and if they like you, they offer you a full-time job after graduation, and that's the pipeline, but that pipeline is shrinking. According to the NALP's latest numbers, the average number of summer job offers per firm hit a record low, lowest they've ever tracked. Firms cut back on hiring in 2024 and 2025. Fewer summer jobs going in means fewer jobs coming out. And the way you get those summer jobs has also changed. The old system was called on-campus interviews, or OCI. Basically, firms came to your law school, you interviewed with them on campus, and that's how you got your foot in the door. That system is basically dead. Only about 20% of summer job offers now come through school interview programs. With the rest, you are applying directly to law firms, and the firms are recruiting earlier and earlier. They're even picking students in their first semester of law school before you even took your first final exam. So a lot of applicants are picturing the old system, but that's not how it works anymore. Now, I'm not anti-T14. I'm against paying for what you don't need. There are situations where a T14 can make sense, even if you're paying full price. If you want to go into big law in New York, DC, or Chicago right out of school, the hiring pipeline at big firms still does run heavily through T14 law schools. The other reason to go to a T14 is if you want a federal clerkship, because that's prestigious. Chicago, for example, places about 28% of its graduates into clerkships. Harvard, over 21% of its graduates go into clerkships. It's a lot harder if you're going outside the T14. And the T14 name, of course, still carries weight in government jobs or policy or academia. It also gives you more geographic freedom because your degree is more portable. The reputation extends beyond the region. And if you want to do public interest law, there are some schools that can make the degree almost free for you. There are even some schools that have programs to help you pay back your loans if you work in public service. For example, NYU's program lets you earn up to $110,000 a year and pay zero on your law school loans. Cornell just raised its cap to $120,000 in salary, the highest of any law school, and Harvard and Yale have their own programs as well. On top of that, there's a federal program called the Public Service Loan Forgiveness. Basically, if you work at a qualifying nonprofit or government job for 10 years, you make your payments, and the rest of your debt gets wiped. That program is thankfully still intact. So if you pair a school's loan repayment program with public service loan forgiveness, you could come out of a T14 with zero remaining debt, but you've actually got to want to work in public interest. And so ask yourself, do you want big law? Do you really want big law? Or do you want to feel like law school was worth it? Because a lot of people mix those up. If you're going to use a T14 degree to do a family law or estate planning, it's not really worth it. You don't need the branch for that. Consider that prestige isn't everything as well. So for example, Stanford Law, tied for number 1 in the US News rankings, they were 20th in actual hiring at the 200 biggest law firms in 2024. Even Fordham and GW, neither of which is in the T14, placed more new lawyers at those firms. So going for a full scholarship can be a great play, but you've got to check 3 things, and most people only look at one of them. First thing you want to check for, does the school get its graduates jobs where you want to practice? A full scholarship at a school where a big chunk of graduates can't actually find legal work is a dead end. You want to go to the American Bar Association required disclosures website, where every law school in the country has to post their job data. What you want to see is the percentage of graduates who got full-time, long-term jobs that actually require a law degree 10 months after graduation. And there is good news. I mean, the class of 2024 hit record employment overall, but the gap between individual schools is huge. If a school has more than 75% job placement, it's pretty decent shape. But if they're below 60%, it shouldn't even matter if their tuition's free because the return isn't good on your having invested your time there. You also want to check whether the scholarship is conditional or unconditional, meaning is there a GPA requirement you've got to meet, a certain threshold you've got to meet to keep the scholarship? A lot of schools will offer you a full ride, but say you've got to maintain a 3.0 or 3.3 GPA to keep it, which might sound easy, but law school grading curves make it hard. Most law schools force professors to give a set number of low grades no matter what. And the American Bar Association tracks what happens to students with these conditional scholarships. About 27% of students lose some or all of their money. That's more than 1 in 4. And at 27 law schools, over a third of students lose their conditional scholarships. There are actually 6 law schools where you are more likely to lose the scholarship than to keep it. So it's like the casino house rules, the house always wins, right? Now, there are fewer schools doing this now that there's more awareness of this. In 2013, 62% of law schools had conditional scholarships. We're now down to less than half of that. Only 29% have conditional scholarships, but you've got to look at the details, read the fine print. The third thing you want to check for is, does the law school run its local job market? A school that's ranked 45th nationally might be the #1 hiring pipeline for every firm and government office in its state. If you want to practice there, that local connection is worth more than a T14 degree from 1,000 miles away. And with the federal loan caps coming up, a full scholarship is worth even more than it was a year ago. Your classmates in the T14 are scrambling to cover a $38,000 annual gap between the tuition and what they can borrow with loans. And so you're sitting at zero tuition with all federal debt where you're eligible for income-based payments and loan forgiveness, and they can't say any of that. Now, I want to circle back to the 2 students I was talking about before. There is a play between going to a T14 and paying full price versus taking a full scholarship at a school ranked 50th that most people aren't aware of. There are a set number of schools ranked 15th through 25th. If you factor in the scholarship money you can get, they're often the best possible deal because they give generous scholarship money to students who could have gotten into a T14, and they've also got pretty great job results as well. So if you get into a T14 and you get an offer of a full ride somewhere in the 30s, you can use both of those to your advantage when you're talking to schools in that 15 to 25 range. I've seen students walk away with half to 3/4 of their tuition covered at places that place 40 to 50% of their graduates into big law with no GPA conditional scholarships. That's often the best move. Now, I mentioned 2 students I wanted to share. Student number 1 had a 170 LSAT, strong GPA, got into 2 T14 law schools with no scholarship money, got a full ride offer at a school ranked in the low 30s, picked the T14 because she wanted big law, graduated with about $260,000 in debt, got the big law job, but hated it, wanted to quit after 18 months. But the debt wouldn't let her quit because she had the loan payments to pay off. In contrast, student number 2, 168 LSAT, got into a couple T14 schools with less scholarship money, only $15,000 a year, got a full ride at a school ranked 35th that dominates hiring in his home state, took the full ride, graduated with minimal debt, only from living expenses. Loan payment was a fraction of the other, only $380 a month, was able to buy a house 2 years out of school, was able to pay off the debt pretty easily. So $380 a month versus $2,200 a month with the same LSAT score, totally different life outcomes financially. So if you're facing this decision right now, I want you to do the math. Go to the ABA website with the disclosures, pull up the job outcomes for each school, run the projected debt numbers on the law school transparency website, and compare median starting salaries. If the school has a GPA condition to maintain the scholarship, check the retention rate. Check what the loan repayment options are, for example, with public service jobs. Then ask yourself what you want your actual work schedule to look like if you want to have work-life balance. And if you're looking for the best possible outcomes, the path forward is pretty simple. Get the highest possible LSAT score. That will get you into better law schools. It'll get you more scholarship money. If you'd like my help reaching that goal whenever you're taking the LSAT, I'm happy to help you out. I'm offering free LSAT tutoring for everybody watching this now or later. The link to book that free tutoring lesson with me is unpluggedprep.com/start. The link is below the video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok and IG as well. I've also put together a free easy LSAT cheat sheet to help you jumpstart your LSAT prep. The link to grab that is unpluggedprep.com/cheat sheet. The link is below the video and in my bio as well. Now, I see some questions here in the chat. I will get to as many of those as I can. Feel free to keep them coming. Anything and everything, LSAT and law school admissions, just drop them in the chat. I'll scan through and see what I could do to help you out. I see Elliot says, just finished 1L at SMU. Grades in the fall were bad because we had a newborn. Worried about jobs. Yeah, that's real. I mean, that's one of those things about conditional scholarships, right? Like life is going to happen and you can't always predict what's going to happen and how that will affect your ability to maintain high grades in school, right? And so having a newborn is a wonderful thing, of course. Congratulations. I have young kids myself. They do eat up a lot of time though, right? And so the question becomes, how can you maintain your grades while also maintaining your family obligations? And if grades have to take a hit, maybe they take a little bit of a hit. And under certain circumstances, that could be okay. But if it means losing your scholarship, that's a problem. And so if you want to maintain maximal optionality and flexibility, since you don't know what curveballs life is going to throw your way, maybe you want to say to yourself, you know what, I only want to take unconditional scholarships. That way, if family stuff comes up or medical stuff comes up or life throws a curve you can't expect in all sorts of ways, you'll still be okay financially. But this was 1L, Elliot, and so in your case, you still have plenty of time to maintain an upward trend in your grades, and so you could still end up being okay. I see David's asking, what if your bachelor's GPA was awful, but your master's GPA was better? So the master's GPA being better is useful context for your application, but it functions essentially like a soft factor because for law school admissions purposes, only your undergraduate GPA matters. They'll see your master's GPA for context, but they're not going to factor it into their formulas and their calculations. And so your situation, I mean, the what if for you is you've got a relatively lower GPA. You're going to want to balance that with a relatively higher LSAT score to compensate, and that's okay. You're going to be a so-called splitter applicant, high LSAT, low GPA. That's okay. Law schools love splitters. In fact, they weigh your LSAT more heavily than your GPA. And so all the more reason for you to shoot for the highest LSAT score possible. If you want to talk through what that path could look like to getting you that higher LSAT score, that's exactly what I do. At LSAT Unplugged, we create custom personal coaching programs for all of our students, considering your starting point, your goals, and your time frame. So in other words, if you want to improve 20 points in the next month, what's that plan going to look like? If you want to improve 30 points in 3 months, what's your study plan going to look like? And if you only need 10 points, we can make a plan for you too. We always look at where you're currently at, what's your goal score, what's your time frame, how many hours can you put in per day, per week, per month? How can you balance your LSAT prep with work and school and family, considering your weak areas, your learning style, your personality fit, all of that good stuff. And so if you want to talk it through, you can book the free tutoring with me. The link to book it is unpluggedprep.com/start. I've also put together a free easy LSAT cheat sheet as a quick reference for you to help you jumpstart your prep. The link to grab that's in my bio as well. Happy to help you out. See, D. Brad says, got a 144 on a practice LSAT. That's okay. Listen, everybody's got to start somewhere. A cold diagnostic simply tells you what you already know, which is that you have not yet learned the language of the LSAT, but you can over time. But it is not destiny. It doesn't tell you what you're going to do at the end of the day. It doesn't tell you what you're capable of. It just tells you the LSAT's like a foreign language. You haven't learned that language yet, but you can. It just tells you got some work ahead of you, and that's okay. Everybody's got to start somewhere. We've seen students improve 20, 30, 40 points or more. Not saying it's easy. Not saying it's going to happen overnight, but it's definitely possible with the right support and the right prep plan. So make sure that you're giving yourself fully invested in this process. I see Elok says, can I go to a T14 with a 170 or should I take it again? Maybe, but I need some more context. What's your undergraduate GPA? and which of the T14 do you want to go to? Because the T14 as a set have varying requirements. The LSAT medians for the T14 range between 170 to 174. And so 170 is on the lower end of that range, but you can also balance it with a higher GPA potentially. The GPAs are 392 to 399. And so maybe 170 could be enough for some of the lower end of the T14 if your GPA is on the higher side. If it's not, you want to be ideally 174, 175 above to compensate. So for the best outcomes, for the maximal likelihood of getting into the T14, I would say you want to get more like a 175 versus a 170. If you want T14, I'd say it probably is worth retaking the 170 to get it up 5 points or more just to maximize your odds of getting in. Just scanning through for other questions here. Feel free to keep them coming. And if you want to talk through what it would look like to retake from 170 to 175, you can book the free tutoring with me as well. Sconce is asking, can I get from 151 to 165-ish by November? Yeah, I mean, you've got 6 months. You can make anything happen in 6 months. And so when people ask me, is this or that possible? My answer is typically going to be, yes, it's possible, provided what you're willing to do to get there. And so how many hours can you put in per day, per week? What kind of support are you getting? Are you self-studying with old prep books like LSAT for Dummies? Are you using official practice questions? Are you just going alone self-studying, or are you getting personal feedback on what you're getting wrong and why you're getting it wrong? Because the thing is that when you're studying on your own, you don't know what you don't know. But once we add some support into the mix, there's usually a pretty quick score boost, meaning there's going to be a lot of low-hanging fruit. And so we can usually give you some pretty quick pointers, get you some pretty easy wins. There are a lot of common misconceptions about the LSAT and studying for it in terms of question type approaches, test taking strategies and tactics. And so if we can help you course correct on just a couple of those, we can usually get you a pretty quick score increase. And so if you want to talk through what that could look like, you can reach out. We provide personal coaching programs with private one-on-one coaching. For a more intensive bootcamp style approach, for those taking the LSAT in a month, for example, we'll have you do live coaching 7 days a week. If you're taking it in 3 months or beyond, we'll take a more slow and steady approach, maybe once or twice a week or so for private one-on-ones. We'll supplement with live small group sessions in the evenings. You'll get access to an on-demand course. We'll create for you a custom study plan. We always personalize the program to the student. This is not a one-size-fits-all because everybody's got a different starting point, goal score, and time frame. So if you want to talk it through, you could DM me, shoot me an email or a text. But the easiest way is just book a free tutoring lesson with me. The link to book it is unpluggedprep.com/start. The link is below the video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok and IG. That is an open offer, by the way, for everybody watching this now or later. Again, unpluggedprep.com/start. For those just joining, I do these lives every single weekday, same time, same place, 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 Central, 11 Pacific, here on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, wherever you're watching this. I don't do any advertising for these lives, so I do appreciate your spreading the word, sharing this to your socials, sharing it in any groups you're part of with other pre-laws. Kayla's asking, will an ADHD diagnosis get me accommodations? The answer is probably yes. For those who aren't aware, LSAC, the Law School Admission Council, has become a lot more liberal in granting accommodations for extra time and extra breaks accommodations. They've gone from approving only, say, 70% of requests to now 98% of requests. So literally 98% of those who request accommodations get them. And so as long as you submit them by the deadline and you have a qualified professional like a primary care physician or a psychiatrist write you a note, you'll probably get the extra time that you're asking for if that's what you're looking for. It says a Praki's asking, what do you recommend for studying by book? So I don't actually recommend studying for the LSAT using books because the LSAT is no longer on paper. Hasn't been on paper for several years now. It's on the computer. And so I recommend studying like it's going to be on game day. The LSAT is administered on the computer. You take it through the Prometric testing software, which is identical to the LSAC Law Hub Advantage platform. So I recommend taking your practice tests on the Law Hub platform, since that's the only place that looks like what it's going to be like on test day. The thing, though, is that the practice tests on the LSAC website don't typically come with explanations. And of course, there's nobody that you can talk to there or get feedback from on what you're getting wrong and why you're getting it wrong. And so if you're looking for more personal guidance and support and getting explanations and feedback on your thought process, that's where personal coaching comes into play. And that's exactly what we offer at LSAT Unplugged, to fill in that gap. And so you can book the free LSAT tutoring with me, and we could talk through it more in terms of what getting you some proper support could look like. Now, as for the LSAT writing, that is unscored. And so for that reason, it's not really that important relative to the scored portions of the LSAT. So for that reason, we say don't even think about the LSAT writing sample until you've hit your goal score on an official LSAT. The scored stuff matters more than the unscored stuff, because the scored stuff is quantifiable and used in the rankings factors, but the unscored factors are not quantified in the same way, of course, so they don't really matter nearly as much. I see David's asking, I am dual enrolled at UCLA and a community college and take classes at both. Will my GPA be averaged? So the credits from both will factor into your LSAC calculated GPA, as long as the credits from both are helping to earn you your bachelor's degree. I wouldn't say they're being averaged necessarily, more like they're all being factored in, but the credits from this place, the credits from that place all get pooled together, and then they're aggregated in their relative proportions to determine your chances, which maybe I'm overcomplicating things in a technical way because I teach the LSAT after all, but bottom line, they're both going to count if they're both factoring into your GPA. And yes, they only count if they work towards your GPA. I'm just scanning through here for other questions, folks. Feel free to keep them coming. Chance is asking, I have a 3.4 GPA. As a sophomore, am I cooked? No, not necessarily, in part because you have plenty of time and space to raise your GPA. You're only a sophomore now. I mean, spring semester is just kind of finishing up now. I don't know if you're counting spring semester grades here, but either way, you've still got half of undergrad to raise your GPA. So I think you are where you are. What's happened is already a done deal. Question is, can you learn from the past that earned you the 3.4? Can you think about what you could do differently next time around for the following semesters to boost up your GPA? Law schools love an upward trend, and that helps as well. So can you give academics more of a focus? Can you go to office hours? Can you do the readings for class and participate in class? Can you take easier classes? All of that's going to help. Not to be a purist about it. I don't need to be, right? My goal is to get you the best possible outcomes. And so if that means taking easier classes or engaging in a bit of strategy, then why not go for it? Law school admissions is pretty numbers driven. And so getting the higher GPA, if it means taking this class over that class or majoring in this subject versus that subject, then think about what's going to get you the best outcomes. Higher GPA is the path forward. And then maybe taking a lighter course load or maybe taking summer classes to spread things out a bit more. That can all help. But what matters more than your GPA is the LSAT. Virtually every single law school weighs your LSAT score more heavily than your undergraduate GPA. And it's kind of crazy how a single test sitting 2.5 hours weighs more heavily than your entire undergraduate GPA combined, but that's just how the game is designed. Law schools in part discount GPA because of rampant grade inflation. Grades are not really comparable between applicants in part because different applicants have different majors from different types of undergraduate institutions, and some folks graduated college last year, others graduated college 20 years ago, and the GPAs would certainly have differing degrees of relevance depending on when you earned it. And so the LSAT, in contrast, is always going to be more standardized because it's one standard exam for everybody, and it has more recency. You've got to have taken the LSAT in the past 5 years for your LSAT score to be valid. So they weigh your LSAT more heavily for that reason. And it's an equalizer regardless of your background. So they factor that more heavily for that reason. Relatedly, I see Nick is asking, do law schools account for difficult majors, like a STEM major, when considering GPA? That's the unfortunate thing, is they don't. In other words, if you major in STEM and have a lower GPA because your classes are harder and more curved, you're going to be penalized for that relative to somebody who got a 4.0 in an easier major that is not curved in the same way and has more grade inflation. The STEM major is useful context for them, but at the same time, the numbers are the numbers. And the numbers get reported to the American Bar Association. US News pulls those numbers for inclusion in the rankings. And so it would be prudent to take easier classes. I'm sad to say, but that's just how the game is designed. If you're already kind of finishing up undergrad and it is what it is, then just devote your effort to the LSAT going forward to offset the GPA. And you could also start studying for the LSAT earlier if you can. You could start now if you haven't already. I see Braden's asking, should I start studying for my LSAT next year? I'm going to be a sophomore. Yeah, I mean, if you're confident that law school is what you want to do and you want a top LSAT score, it's not crazy to start that early. I don't think you necessarily have to start that early, but you could. I don't think you need 3 years to study for the LSAT or 2 years. I think that 6 months to 1 year max would be sufficient. But in part, consider what your goals are. Do you want a 170, 175 plus? Do you want to go to a top 14 law school? Do you want a full ride? On average, the folks who put in more time to their LSAT prep tend to get better results. It's rare that I see somebody getting 175 who knocked it out in just a month or two. There are people like that, of course, but they tend to be the exception, at least in my anecdotal experience of having done this for 20 years. It takes more time than you might think to get a top score, but it's worth putting in the time. I see Schaefer DeBeast is asking, what should I do as a rising junior in college? I mean, if you haven't started studying for the LSAT yet, it's not too early to start. Maintain a high GPA while you're still in undergrad. Don't let your grades slip. But junior year is a good time to start studying for the LSAT if you haven't already. If you can knock it out on the earlier side, then coast stress-free and enjoy senior year. That's a pretty good place to be. I see Douglas is asking, how do you think community college credits affect applications? They can help. I mean, a lot of folks will take classes at a community college to boost their GPA, to boost their grades, because the credits are cheaper and they tend to be higher grades, tend to be easier classes than wherever you're going to college normally. And so not a bad move. It's kind of a stealth move there. I think it's a good strategy. Nathan says, I've been waitlisted at NYU, Columbia, Vanderbilt, Berkeley, Georgetown. What should I do? So a lot of wait lists. Yeah, I mean, that's unfortunate and all too normal these days because of the surge in applications in recent years. What should you do? You can do a couple things. One is send a letter of continued interest, reiterating your interest in the school, saying, hey, Columbia, hey, Georgetown, you guys are both my top choice. I'm still waiting on you, as for the others as well. Same deal. Here's a quick update on what I've been up to since I applied. You could also retake the LSAT to boost your score up with as an additional update to help you get off the waitlist. No guarantees, of course, but not a terrible idea and really not much downside since only the highest LSAT score counts. So those are two things you could do. Number one, again, letter of continued interest, updating them. Number two, retake the LSAT to get off the waitlist. Two things to think about. Nick asks, how do I pick up the LSAT again after focusing on career for a couple of years? The best way to get back into it is to just literally get back into it, just like how you get back into working out after having not worked out for a while. Do it slowly to dust off the cobwebs and so that you don't burn out, then build up the muscle little by little. Take a practice test, do a couple questions, wake up those parts of your brain, then do some more questions, and then just do more the day after that and continue. And then immerse yourself in the world of the LSAT. So for example, beyond these daily lives that I do, every single weekday, same time, same place, 2 p.m. Eastern. I also have a YouTube channel, the LSAT Unplugged YouTube channel, the LSAT Unplugged podcast. I'm at LSAT Unplugged on all the socials like TikTok and Instagram and such. I'm on LinkedIn as well. And so if you can immerse yourself in this world of LSAT and law school admissions with the kinds of content that you consume in your social media and your podcast listening and such, you'll be more likely to keep taking one step forward after the other on this journey towards applying to law school with a top LSAT score or top strong application. So just spend your time here and you'll make more traction if you're doing other stuff. RCT is asking, how does law admissions view applications that took years off between undergrad and law school? It's totally normal. They don't look down on that in any way if that's your concern. The question would be, what did you do during that time? You could use that gap year or gap years to study for the LSAT, get some work experience, maybe in the field of law, like working as a paralegal, for example. Not a bad thing to do. Whatever you've done, just highlight it in your resume, get related letters of recommendation, maybe talk about that time in your application essays, and even taking a gap year just to study for the LSAT could be well worth it if it leads you to get a higher score. But there's no downside to taking a gap year if you feel like you need that time for whatever reason. Nick asks, do KJDs have a disadvantage? Maybe at some schools more than others. But at the same time, you got to think about, well, if you are applying directly from undergrad into law school, which is what a KJD is doing, is it because you're confident that law school is what you want to do? If so, just go ahead and do it, because there's a major cost to taking gap years, which is every year you spend not having a JD is a year that you're not making forward progress in your legal career and not earning a lawyer's salary, and instead you're earning a non-lawyer's salary. And presumably most of you, I think, are expecting to earn more money after law school, and that's why you're investing yourself in this, right? So there's a cost to not being an attorney. And so if you're confident it's what you want to do, then go for it. And a KJD is not necessarily at any disadvantage. Some law schools do like work experience, not going to lie about that. But at the same time, the numbers are the numbers. And so if you have a good LSAT score, if you have a good GPA, then go for it. And law schools consider your GPA more the more recently you earned your GPA. And so if your GPA is really good, you want that recency effect to help you. If your GPA is really bad from undergrad, then maybe you do want to put some distance between yourself and having earned it. In other words, if your GPA from undergrad's low, but it was earned 5 years ago, then who you were back then is not who you are now. And you've grown, you've changed, you've matured, and then they will place less emphasis on your GPA and more emphasis on that LSAT score instead, because that is the more recent metric for them to focus on. Luca asks, what should I aim to get on the LSAT if I have a 3.3 GPA because of engineering? Aim for a 180. No matter what your GPA is, why wouldn't you aim for the highest possible LSAT score? I mean, goal scores are kind of silly, right? Like, why wouldn't you just want to understand everything? If you're asking what LSAT score do you need, the question is, what are your goals? The numbers that you need are only relative to the goals that you're shooting for. So what kind of law school do you want to go to? We can look at the medians of those law schools to see what numbers to target in terms of getting in. But if you also want law school scholarship money, then we also want to get you above the LSAT median and above the GPA median to increase the offers you're going to get. Ideally, for the best possible outcomes for a given law school, you want to be above the LSAT median and the GPA median, and even better, above the 75th percentile on both LSAT and GPA. And if you're below on the GPA because you have the 3.3 in engineering, then you want to be even higher on the LSAT score to compensate. And if you want a T14, then you really want to have a super, super high LSAT, like a 175 plus 180 to compensate. And if you want to talk through what your LSAT prep plan could look like to get you the highest possible LSAT score, then you can book that free LSAT tutoring lesson with me. The link to book it is unpluggedprep.com/start. The link is below the video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok and IG. I've also put together a free easy LSAT cheat sheet to help you jumpstart your LSAT prep. It's like a quick reference on everything logical reasoning and reading comprehension. You can grab that in my bio as well, or in the link below the video. Unpluggedprep.com/cheat sheet is the URL. I see Steve, fellow Steve there, is asking, feeling overwhelmed on the LSAT journey, where to start, just starting off. The LSAT cheat sheet's a good starting point. The free tutoring with me is a good starting point. Both are in my bio. Basically, when you're crafting a study plan for yourself because you're just getting started with your LSAT prep, you want to build a strong foundation. I divide LSAT prep into 3 major phases: accuracy, pacing, and endurance. Accuracy is the foundational phase, learning the different LSAT sections, the different question types in both logical reasoning and reading comprehension. Then once you feel reasonably proficient, like you're at, say, 70-80% accuracy untimed, you then want to introduce timing, doing individual sections to work on your pacing and your time management. Then you want to pull it all together, doing full-length timed practice tests. At LSAT Unplugged, we typically have our students doing at least 10 to 15 full-timed exams before the big day, so that test day itself will be like just another run-through, and you've done it all before. But you don't want to do tons of full exams until you've built that strong foundation in both logical reasoning and reading comprehension. So first things first, one thing we do for our students is we craft for you a personalized study plan, laying out exactly what to do every single day from now till your test, including when to drill questions by type, when to do timed LSAT sections, when to take full-length practice tests, because the worst thing is studying, but studying the wrong way, studying inefficiently. And the thing is that when you're studying on your own, you just don't know what you don't know. And so getting some personal support, even just a couple targeted tutoring sessions, can make a really big impact. And that's why I'm offering these sessions for free just to get you jump started. We personalize every program for the student, so there's no one set program. It's always custom based on where you're at, what your goals are, and what your time frame is. Someone who's aiming for a 180, starting at a 120 is going to need a lot more help than someone who's starting at a 160 looking to get a 165. So we always customize the degree of support to get you to your goal, nothing more, nothing less, based on when you want to get there by. So the best way to figure it out is to talk it through on a call. You can book it through my bio as well. Feel free to DM as well. Happy to help you out. I see Kins is asking about tips to improve reading comprehension. Well, I guess my first question would be, Kins, if you want to share, what's your approach like right now? How do you currently approach reading comprehension? If you want to share, just drop that in the chat. But basically, I find a lot of students will take too many notes. They'll highlight and underline far too much. For those who are not familiar with the LSAT software, it's not that reliable, not that user-friendly. It's kind of glitchy and imprecise. And so for that reason, we recommend staying away from using the LSAT functions on the software, like the highlighting and underlining, keeping it pretty minimal. If you note anything, just note it on your scratch paper on the side. And keep it very light because it takes time to write things down. It takes time to read things, and what you end up writing down ends up not even being that useful and kind of clutters the page, clutters the passage regardless. I'll typically recommend spending approximately 3 minutes on your initial read of the passage so that you still have enough time to solve the questions associated. When you are approaching the questions in reading comprehension, we place them into 3 different buckets: global questions like main idea, primary purpose, passage organization, best title for the passage, tone, author's opinion. Knock those out first. Those are the gimmies. Then you've got your local questions that are more detail-oriented. And finally, you have the more inferential questions that require a bit more reading between the lines. I would save those for last. And this is all very broad general advice because I can't go more specific in a context like this. If you want to look at a question together, you want to talk through your reading comp approach, you can book the free tutoring with me. Again, the link is unpluggedprep.com/start. The link is below the video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio as well. In that free LSAT cheat sheet I mentioned, which is linked below and in the bio as well, I also walk through some reading comp approaches there as well. So you can actually see some more concrete tips and tactics to boost your score pretty fast, going through what I just talked about on the live here. For those just joining, I do these lives every single weekday, same time, same place, 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 Central, 11 Pacific, here on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, wherever you're watching this. If you find these helpful, please spread the word. The algorithm doesn't really boost these because they can't run ads during them. And the LSAT's kind of a niche topic. There's probably more sexy and engaging topics out there, but this is important, of course, so I'm glad you're here and you've made a deliberate choice by staying here to focus on your LSAT prep, which I do appreciate. So I'll try to answer as many questions as I can, but please do spread the word about this if you can. I do appreciate the support. Mala asks, my best friend studying for her LSAT, what is some good advice to give her? And that's kind of the whole point of everything I do, is just giving more and better LSAT advice. I would say send her to my YouTube channel. That's where you can watch the recordings of this live and all the previous lives covering everything LSAT and law school admissions. I have videos on logical reasoning, reading comprehension, study plans, law school admissions as well. If your friend wants to reach out for the free tutoring lesson or the cheat sheet, I'll be happy to help her out. But you're a good friend to be asking for her. I see Colin's asking, I'm delaying my bachelor's by another year. Is a year and a half good study time for the LSAT? Yeah, you mean a year and a half is more than enough. I would think that 6 months should be sufficient to hit a top score. The question is, what does your study plan look like? And how many hours can you put in per day and per week? When you've got a year and a half, you can really take it slow and steady, which is nice because the LSAT is a skills-based test, not a test of memorization or cramming. And so if you can give it more time, you're going to get a better score. I see a question from someone asking, when I drill 5 questions, I get 100%. When I drill 12, I get 40%. Okay, so assuming that all the questions are of equal difficulty between the two sets, it sounds like an endurance issue, which is important because it's not enough to get the questions right. You got to get them right under test day conditions, considering pacing and time management and endurance. And so 5 questions are good. Instead of going from 5 to 12, let's go from 5 to 6, then from 6 to 7, then from 7 to 8. Keep in mind that test day is going to be 100 questions, so there is a long road ahead of you in terms of building up endurance. But what if for every single day, you just added one more question to the set? Within approximately 3 months, you're going to get to that 100 question limit. On test day, for those who aren't aware, you do 4 sections of approximately 25 questions each. It's 2 sections back to back, each section being 35 minutes. You then have a 10-minute break. You then have 2 more sections back to back, and that's the test. It takes about 2.5 hours overall. And so 5 questions, it takes about maybe 8 minutes or so. So 8 minutes versus 2.5 hours, big difference in endurance. But that's one reason why we have our students doing 10, 15 exams under timed conditions before the big day, simulating test day conditions to work on that endurance factor. Thanks for joining, folks. I'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place, 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 Central, 11 Pacific. Thanks for joining. I'll see you all then. In the meantime, all the best and take care.